This is TWiT.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to TWiT, your tech hub for intelligent, thoughtful conversations. If you want to take your experience to the next level and support what we do here at TWiT, say goodbye to ads and say hello to Club TWiT. With Club TWiT, you unlock all our shows ad-free. You also get exclusive members-only content. We do a lot of great programming just for the club members. You also get behind-the-scenes access with our TWiT Plus bonus feed and live video streams while we're recording. And don't forget the fantastic members-only Discord. It's where passionate tech fans like you and me hang out, swap ideas, and connect directly with all of our hosts. It's my favorite social network. I think you'll like it too. Club TWiT. It's not just a subscription. It's how you support what we do and become part of the TWiT family. Your membership directly supports the network, helping us stay independent and keep making the shows you love. If you're ready to upgrade your tech podcast experience, head to twit.tv/clubtwit and join us today. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the club. Hey, club members. Hello, everybody. Good to see you. Happy New Year. First show in 10 days. The studio is still rebooting. Apologies, but I didn't want to waste any more time. We got a jam-packed day today. We're getting back in business in a big way. This is the second day of the new year. Happy 2026. Coming up in about an hour, our AI user group. We're going to have some fun. I brought my new laptop, and I'm going to show you how I did the entire Linux configuration using Claude Code, using AI. It's kind of mind-boggling. Anthony Nielsen says he's going to try. Are you going to be able to do it, Anthony? To make one of those, this is the hot new AI thing, those selfie videos where you take a picture of yourself and then you pose with all these celebrities. We'll show you one or two, and so you can see what they are. And then Anthony's going to show you how to do it, right? Maybe not do it in real time, but we'll show you how to do it. We'll do what we can. Yeah. So that's coming up. That's the AI users group. But I thought we'd do something a little different to kick things off in the new year. You know, as you know, we mostly just geek out, and I'm a big fat geek, and I think probably many of you are at least geeks. So I understand. Yes, the progress bar is moving, Wizardling, slowly. I'm telling you, the studio had to reboot. A lot of this stuff was funky. I had to do stuff. It's funny because I'm a big fan of Johnny Carson. Most of you are probably too young to really have grown up with Johnny Carson. He started hosting The Tonight Show in the 60s. We're going to get the whole story in just a little bit. And did it for 30 years. You might be old enough to remember his last show where Bette Midler came on and sang and everybody cried and stuff. I'll never forget that. But he really defined entertainment, and especially comedy, but entertainment in general was probably the dominant force for 30 years. And people of my generation, people who work in the business, as I sort of have in television and radio, greatly inspired by him, and including many of the people that you watch today, Jimmy Fallon and David Letterman, and so many people grew up inspired by and informed by how Johnny Carson did The Tonight Show for so many years. So I'm a big fan. When I saw a new book came out called Love Johnny Carson, I thought, oh, I got to get this. I had listened to Ed McMahon's book about working with Johnny and getting drunk with Johnny. And I thought, oh, this is great, because the author was a comic who had interviewed on his podcast, his eponymous podcast, more than, I think, 500 people about Johnny and about being on The Tonight Show and Johnny's influence on them. And I thought, wow, that's great. So I downloaded the audiobook and I started listening. Weirdly, the next day I got an email from this guy here, Mark Malkoff. He said, hey, I know you do tech shows, but do you think you'd ever want? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I'm listening right now. Yes. So Mark, it's a pleasure to meet you. New York-based comic. You do stand-up, Mark?
I used to. I think I'm going to go back to it. I did a lot of comedy videos that would make the news, social experiments. More.
Oh, that's a kind of nice, interesting kind of comedy. Not on stage, but it's more modern in YouTube. But yes. But you also, like me, are a podcaster. How many episodes of Love Johnny Carson have you done?
Gosh, the Carson podcast, we did almost 400, and those are all available, carsonpodcast.com. And we're doing new ones. And then I have a podcast, Inside Late Night, where I talk to people from Saturday Night Live and all the late night shows, past and present. And that's part of latenighter.com. So we've done probably 70, maybe.
So you've become kind of the expert, I guess, in televised comedy.
Yes, but I'm the late night nerd. I mean, I had a day job at Letterman. I worked on the Colbert Report.
Oh, did you? What'd you do at Letterman?
Yeah. Oh, I was there for 11 months and 15 days, but who's counting, Leo? I worked at the Ed Sullivan Theater on the 8th floor, and I was part of the audience department. I wasn't a page, but I would get people tickets. I'd be in the studio.
You might have got. It's funny because I went to see. I've seen both Johnny in Burbank, and I've seen Letterman at the Ed Sullivan Theater. And I went to see Letterman, and I'm in the line, to go in, and a page comes up to me and says, "You can't sit here. You have to sit upstairs because if you're in the business," and I'm amazed that the guy recognized me. This guy was really good because I'm not, I'm a E-list celebrity. But he recognized me. He said, no, we only let amateurs sit in the front row, people who are so excited that they will go, ah! And industry types are too cool. They go, yeah. So he said, you're in the balcony, which was fine. But
what happened is, if Dave recognizes any public figure, it throws him off. He doesn't want anybody well-known in there. This even applies to people that worked at the show. So when I left the show, anybody that leaves, you're not allowed to be in the audience because it might throw Dave off if he recognizes you.
He looks down at you and then he forgets his,
Yeah. So the public figures are normally up in the balcony, and then they smuggled me into the Johnny Carson tribute show when Johnny passed away. And that was a big deal. I had to beg for that. But Dave is definitely one of those performers that he gets thrown off, where someone like Leno or Johnny Carson, it didn't matter who was in the audience, but Dave was very particular. So
his warm-up is amazing because he has a Shure SM58 microphone that comes down on a mic cable and hangs in front of him, and then it gets longer and longer, so it's got a lot of play. And the thing is that dented like crazy because he swings it around, he bangs it. He's hysterical. I would say, after growing up watching Johnny from a young age, I would stay up late and watch it. I know you did too, because it was on at 11:30, the Tonight Show. Right. I was very much influenced by Carson. And then when Letterman came on, my style completely changed. I mean, my entire television, I never told anybody this, my entire television presentation is totally a copy of David with the hands and the whole thing. It's David Letterman.
Such a good broadcaster. I mean, an amazing broadcaster. I'd say number 2 to Johnny. And Dave was one of those people that was doing things that had never been done on TV. Now, he did give some attribution to Steve Allen. He did some Steve Allen type bits.
A lot of
what he was
things that you thought maybe David Letterman invented, like the giant Alka-Seltzer suit dropped in water or the Velcro wall. Yeah. Steve Allen had done 30 years earlier on the Tonight Show. So let's go back to the beginning. So the Tonight Show was a Steve Allen creation, right?
It was actually, Steve Allen and Sigourney Weaver's father, Pat Weaver. Pat Weaver wanted a Today Show at late at night, and Steve Allen was one that said, no, we should do comedy during this time.
They wanted a variety show like the Today Show. The thing about the Today Show,
it was going to be news. They thought they wanted news originally, and Steve Allen was like, "No, people are going to bed. They want to be entertained."
Exactly, it was completely wrong. Yeah. The Today Show is designed to be played on the TV while you're doing other things, while you're making breakfast, while you're getting the kids off to school. So there's, you can listen to it. It's basically a radio show with pictures. That is not what people want when they're lying in bed, as Johnny used to say, looking between their 2 feet at the TV screen. And I think Steve was exactly right. He actually invented the format.
The show was at the Hudson Theater here in New York City, and it was an hour and 45 minutes live. So people were not getting out. If you worked on that show till 1 a.m, you'd be wired. Doc Severinsen was actually part of Steve Allen's band. Doc is still around. I've talked to him a bunch of times, and they would go out the band afterwards and not get home till 2 or 3 in the morning. And that was, that's what their life was.
It's crazy. So it was, subsequent show was Parr. So Parr, who followed Steve Allen, was he live too?
Jack Parr in the beginning was live, and then he went into what is now Jimmy Fallon's studio, which became Johnny Carson's studio. And it was live in the beginning, and then they started taping it, and it just made everybody's life easier.
They tape at 5 p.m., is that right?
It was different times. I mean, sometimes it was 8 o'clock, sometimes it was 7 o'clock. But when Carson moved to Burbank, it was 5:30.
That's when I saw him.
Was 5:30.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that, Jack Parr and Steve Allen only did the show for like 4 or 5 years. So it was unheard of that somebody would host a late night show for more than 5 years. 10 years was outrageous, let alone 30 years. That was not what.
Because it's grueling. Did. Think about it.
Yes,
in fact, you tell the story. Carson quit after just a few years.
A few times. He was just so tired. He was doing an hour and 45 minutes. It would be the equivalent to the late night host now doing a show every single day of the year, plus I think double on some of the days. And Carson was just tired. I mean, that was pure and simple. I mean, nobody knows how hard it is. One of his competitors said it was like shoveling snow for 8 hours. Everyone that tried to do this just said, nobody's going to be the next Johnny Carson. It was brutal.
Yeah. He did it so effortlessly, and he felt so at home, and it felt like he was enjoying himself most of the time. Not always. You could always tell when he wasn't enjoying himself.
Sometimes if the guest was bad, it was hard for him.
Part of his charm. I watched after you talked about the 2 Peter O'Toole interviews, the first of which it was just after Lawrence of Arabia, and O'Toole was drunk. He'd apparently drank heavily on the plane and then got backstage, and there was more liquor, and he was literally incomprehensible.
Carson really cut to a commercial and tried to say he's exhausted. He was flying, I think, from Tokyo, and it was a 19-hour flight, and O'Toole was just downing alcohol and not eating, and it was train wreck. And then O'Toole collapsed backstage afterwards and cried, realizing that kind of humiliated himself. But yeah, that was definitely with the liquor. People would be smoking. For younger people would smoke and drink on camera on those late night shows in the 60s and early 70s. It was definitely the Wild West.
We watched the Gleason clip, the only time Jackie Gleason ever appeared.
That's right.
By the way, you will go down the rabbit hole that I went down. So I'm listening to the book, and then you go, oh, I got to hear this interview that you did, because you in the book, even the audio book, you don't have the actual audio of the interviews. You just have the stories. So I went and I listened to the podcast, and then you listen to the podcast and you go, well, I've got to see that first appearance of Robin Williams or whatever. And the good news is, not only is there an official Johnny Carson channel on YouTube where you can see a lot of these clips, but there's a lot of bootleg stuff. Pretty much everything, including the Peter O'Toole, at least the second one, because O'Toole comes back.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, because Johnny wants to give him another chance. And by the way, it's much later. It's after The Stuntman, after he did the movie The Stuntman. It
goes a lot better. Marlon Brando in 1964 was drunk also on this show, and then he went back on 1968, and both acknowledged they had drank way too much. On YouTube, over 3 billion views of Johnny Carson, the official YouTube channel, over 1 million subscribers. People miss this guy. I think if anybody's going into entertainment, media, it's good to study this guy. 30 years, dominated popular culture, had everybody who was anybody pass through that show. It's really an amazing time capsule.
I said at the beginning that really Johnny was the most important thing in the entertainment, just as Ed Sullivan was before him. The Johnny Carson show made you or break you. In fact, you interview and tell the stories of so many comics who to this day say, without Johnny, I would have no career.
Not even comedians. A lot of comedians, and they would get very emotional and sometimes teary-eyed and cry to me. But someone like Jimmy Buffett told me, Mark, it was the biggest break of my career in 1981. I couldn't get on TV before Johnny Carson, and it changed my career. And you're the first person that ever asked me about going on Carson. So I think a lot of these iconic performers really just wanted to tell their stories, and some of them for the first time, like Jimmy Buffett.
How many interviews did you do on the show?
Oh, gosh. I mean, for the podcast and the book, if I had to guess, it was over 400, maybe 450, something like that, interviews.
Wow.
With both of them combined. I mean, people like Jay Leno wouldn't come on my podcast, but I got 50 minutes with Leno for the book, and he was nice.
Oh, that's interesting.
So there's
just
a bunch
didn't want
of
to be heard, or?
I don't think somebody that knew Jay told me that Jay knows I knew too much, and I would ask him some tough questions because he's like they just, and he did this on the phone with me, and I always very politely push back. He's like, they just gave me the show, after John, and I'm like, Jay, you and your manager Helen Kushnick were politicking. You went to every NBC affiliate, shook everybody's hands, and all this stuff, and he basically then would change the subject, but every time he just tried to say something, I would push back. I don't think he wanted to subject himself to some of that. So,
there's a wonderful book about this called the War for Late Night.
Yeah, The Late Shift, Bill Carter.
Bill Carter. If you are at all interested in this, it's really amazing, to the point where Leno was like spying, was listening in on conference room meetings. And
That's right.
And I watched the clip of Johnny interviewing Letterman shortly after this all happened.
Yeah.
And he asking, "Are you mad?"
Yeah. Just how pissed are you? And it was definitely one of those as Bill Carter talks about that book, it's very Shakespearean, the stuff that was going on behind the scenes with Leno allegedly, Leno admits it, spying on what was going on. And there was a lot of drama. People, but, Johnny wanted Letterman to be the success.
That's right.
Johnny had no say, but as I always say, I thought for NBC, it was to me, this is what happened. Jay went to all the affiliates. Anybody that NBC needed something, he would do it. Or Dave is calling the NBC execs pinheads.
Right.
And he's making fun of GE.
Right.
So
remember that?
Who are you going to give the show to? So they just wanted somebody who's going to be a lot easier, and that was Jay. And
well, it's a great story because CBS realized what NBC had done wrong, and of course built a theater, took the Ed Sullivan's Theater, remade it for Dave, and Dave had a run that was at least as successful as Leno's, and probably rivaled Johnny's own run.
I mean, they paid $5 million for the Ed Sullivan Theater. I was at Dave's very first show, August 30th, 1993, in that space, and it was electric. It was one of the biggest media events of the year to be there. And that was Dave. Dave had a wonderful run. I mean, he was number one for a while, and then Jay just powerhoused, and the shows were very close in ratings. And but looking back, the critics, the comedians, really, Letterman is the show that people remember and they still talk about. Where Jay's Tonight Show, even though it was number one, it was like The Honeymooners was number two in the time slot compared to Perry Como's show. But who do they talk about now?
Remember? Yeah.
So that was Letterman. He's the one that everyone kind of like still worships and reveres. Where Jay,
I certainly get the sense that it was Steve Allen and Letterman who are the most creative, but that America didn't want too much edginess, didn't want too much creativity, especially late at night. And so Johnny, and I think to some extent Leno, certainly Johnny with his Midwest Nebraska style, his very relaxed delivery, he was made for late night. And it wasn't that edgy. Although, do you think at the time people thought what Carson was doing was edgy?
I mean, some of the things in his monologue and the sketches were risque, but he was this guy from Nebraska that just knew I'm going to entertain the audience. I'm not going to be controversial. He wouldn't do anything to offend the audience or a guest. His rule was, I'm going to make my guest look good, where Dave Letterman sometimes would upset his guest. I mean, I can name some of the guests that refused to go back on the show. Tim Allen was one of them. Tim Allen went on the show and it was a disaster. He was really unhappy, and he just said to himself, I'm never going to go back on. And he never did. There's a list of people, unfortunately.
Actually, it's interesting because you talk about this. It went the other way with Johnny. Johnny would say, I'm never having that person on again.
There were a long list of people that—
There were grudges.
Johnny was having these people into his home, and if they were rude to his staff, it was over. There were just the certain things that Johnny thought were unforgivable. Some of it does look petty. Johnny was a very sensitive person, and his feelings were hurt very easily. And there was a long list of people. When we go into the band list, I mean, there's way more I couldn't include in the book. But Richard Dawson from the Family Feud's another one I didn't include in the book, but he was banned as well. A long list of people.
What did he do to get banned?
Okay, so in the early 80s, I think it might have been 81, 82, it could have been 80. in Iran, I believe it was Iran, and there were hostages and U.S. hostages, and I think a couple U.S. service people were killed. And Richard Dawson was supposed to guest host the show. People would substitute host for Johnny, and within like 2 or 3 hours of the show, Dawson said, "I'm not feeling funny. I can't do this," and he canceled, leaving the show scrambling. Luckily, they were able to get Bert Convey last minute, but
Wow.
they never had him back to guest host or anything. And yeah, I mean, Jerry Lewis was rude to Carson's staff, so Johnny said no more. He's gone. So Dana Carvey would do these sketches on Saturday Night Live mocking Johnny, and Johnny hated them, and Dana Carvey was another guy that was banned. So what can you do?
Yeah. This actually kind of shocked me. You talk about Bob Newhart, who filled in for Johnny hundreds of times, was a regular fill-in, but was not beloved by the staff. It turned out he was kind of a jerk.
There were a couple writers that would say that he would just, he wanted them to write him Bob Newhart routines, which that's not an easy thing for
not every night for a week or two. No.
And then alleged they told me that that Newhart would take those routines and put it in a stand-up act without any attribution, without any payment. And they would just either call in sick when he was hosting, and Newhart would be like, "Why does everyone have the flu when I guest host the show?" So Johnny loved him, and they were pals. Johnny had this amazing Malibu home, and Newhart walked in and said, "Where's the gift shop?" Because it was so huge.
That's a good line.
All over the place. So they were definitely friends, but some of the writers. There were certain guest hosts, the writers were just like, "I don't want to come into work." So
Rodney Dangerfield says, "I would have zero career if it weren't for Johnny Carson." He appeared many times on Carson.
He
would talk about material. Yeah. He would burn material. He'd go through a joke every 20 seconds on that.
Most comedians would do 25 jokes, and they had to be killer jokes. Rodney would do 25 jokes doing stand-up, sit down with Johnny and do another 25 jokes.
And just sit here. And my wife, I done. And then he would just go on and on and on. And Johnny loved it. He ate it up. You'd see him just cracking up.
I'm so glad it worked out, because in the early 60s, Rodney wrote Johnny a very angry letter filled with 4-letter words and said, "One of your writers ripped off one of my jokes," and attacked Johnny with words. And Dangerfield, it took him like 6 or 7 years until he finally apologized to Johnny. And then in 1969, Dangerfield made his debut, and Johnny said, "I'm not going to call him over to the couch. I'm not going to call him over." But Dangerfield was so funny that Johnny had no choice and called him over, and history was made. And Dangerfield, to this day, I think is one of maybe the best stand-up comic that went on the show, and people are still millions of views on YouTube of Dangerfield's appearances, still as funny as they were.
Yeah, he was so quick. Another guy you think of who was just lightning fast, Don Rickles.
Don Rickles. Like to think about in 1965 when Don Rickles appeared on the show and no one knew who he was, that Johnny had to take 2 or 3 minutes.
Explain.
This guy that's coming out, he's gonna make fun of me, but it's okay. We can laugh at it, because it was unheard of for somebody to go out and insult the comedian. So it was decided that Rickles would come on. He could make fun of Ed McMahon and the band leader, who was Skitch Henderson at the time. They would see Johnny laugh at this, and then it would be okay for Rickles to make fun of Johnny. But it was unheard of. And Rickles to this day said that his career was helped by Johnny Carson and Frank Sinatra. Before then, Rickles could not get booked on late night TV before Carson. So he gave Carson a lot of credit.
It was kind of a Vegas act where, because nobody knew about insult comics. Now you kind of know.
Insult comics, yeah. Now it's ubiquitous, but back then, oh my goodness, he took a chance on a lot of people. Put people that were unknowns on. Ross Perot, the first billionaire, Johnny put on the show in New York. No one knew who this guy H. Ross Perot was. Frank Abagnale, who Catch Me If You Can, the con man, that was all Johnny. The book came about. Johnny called Abagnale the next day and said, "You have to write this book. I'm going to get you a literary agent." It all, came from Johnny.
I've interviewed Frank Abagnale. It turns out Frank conned Johnny, and he conned me, because most of the stuff in that book
I heard.
Never happened.
That I didn't know that, and Johnny would have been
no one knew
really upset. Johnny would not put anybody on that was not if he knew they weren't telling the truth or honest, he wouldn't have had them on. But Abagnale, I mean, the Broadway musical, the movie, it all came from
Catch Me
Johnny.
If
And I'm
You
sure,
Can. Yeah.
So there were so many people. I mentioned Jimmy Buffett that were just Johnny showcased to America. But if anybody was fake or phony, he wouldn't have them on the show if he had knowledge.
I listened to your interview on the podcast. We're talking with Mark Malkoff. He's the author of a new book, Love Johnny Carson. I'm listening to it on Audible, but you can also read it in Dead Tree material. But he also does a podcast. If you go to carsonpodcast.com, you can listen to several hundred shows. And most of them are interviews with people about Carson. The last one I just listened to was Stephen Wright, the famous Boston kind of downbeat comic. It's one of my favorite comics because, again, he's very original, very different. He'd only been working, this kind of blew me away. No one ever heard of him. He'd only been working in Boston for 3 years. He hadn't done the things that comics usually have to do to become famous. And Carson's director, Peter LaSalle, or one of his producers, Peter LaSalle, saw him in Boston. And 2 weeks after seeing the show, Wright's going, well, I guess I'll never hear from them, calls and says, come on. He was in tears during your interview with him. Yeah,
it was really emotional. Stephen Wright never occurred to me. He'd only been doing stand-up a couple years, was in his house in Massachusetts watching cartoons. And the Tonight Show calls. And not only does he get called over to the couch, which is only like 15, 17 comedians have ever were called over debuting on Carson. I mean, Seinfeld took 5 appearances to get called over. Stephen Wright was called over right away. And then Johnny wanted him back the next week, which almost never happened. Maybe with Joan Rivers. And Stephen Wright was back and it launched him. I mean, when Stephen Wright won an Oscar for Best Short Film, he thanked Johnny. And he, to this day, told me, and he'll say this in interviews, that Johnny Carson changed his life.
So that's actually a challenge because most of the time with a comic, you spend a lot of time on stage working on material. You create a tight 5. You're getting, you know, hoping that someday you're going to get on the show. Mm-hmm. Johnny calls you, got your tight 5. Sure. Then you get called, can you come back in a week? And of course, you got to have all new material.
And that Jay Leno got banned for 7 years from Johnny's show because he ran out of material. Johnny kept putting him back, and Jay ran out. He bombed once or twice on the show. And Carson was he's never coming on. But the best thing that happened to Leno was that because he started going on Dave Letterman's NBC 1230 show and got red hot. He did 40 appearances, and Leno was one of the hottest stand-ups then in the country. And Carson changed his mind, had him back on. Jay was very shrewd and said, I'll come on if you let me guest host the show twice. Did very well. And of course, I mean, he got permanent guest host and got the Tonight Show. So yeah, Jay was very calculated. He told, because Johnny owned the Tonight Show, and he basically said, I'll do the show for $512, whereas all the other comedians wanted thousands of dollars to guest host.
That was after a minimum for an appearance.
Yeah, Jay knew that he could go to Vegas and Atlantic City and on the road and get so much money being, well, Joan Rivers is the permanent guest host, broke Frank Sinatra's record for residency in either Atlantic City or Vegas. I mean, that visibility was unbelievable. So yeah, they wanted to give the permanent guest host to Gary Shandling, but they turned it down. So reluctantly, it went to Leno.
You know what's great is Gary Shandling then made one of the best satiric shows ever about late night television, the Gary Shandling Show, which is just, I watched today, is still brilliant.
Everything he did, that Shandling, it's Gary Shandling Show, the Larry Sanders Show.
Larry Sanders, that's
funny.
It. Yeah.
It's so darn funny. But Shandling was one of those, him and Letterman were the only 2 people as unknowns that guest hosted the show. It was 4 appearances after Letterman, they had him guest host, and that was such a huge deal. And of course, Letterman then got his own show after Johnny, and history was made.
You mentioned a couple of times coming over to the couch, and I think for somebody who watches The Tonight Show these days, that may not resonate. In the original format of The Tonight Show, guests would stick around after the interview.
It was wonderful. They don't do that on late night anymore, but a lot of the times the guests would just stick, and you get these
would slide over
combinations. And sometimes there would be some drama. I mean, I write about this in the book. You have George Papard, who's from the A-Team and Breakfast at Tiffany's actor. He was drunk out of his mind on the show. I've watched this clip many times, and singer Paul Williams told me this story, and I watched the clip. It was 1974, I think. And George Papard calls Paul Williams a midget, and Paul Williams
he was very
to
short.
fight.
Let's be fair.
He gets ready to fight Papard, and it was so much drama. Johnny runs off the set because there's so much drama, and actor Richard Harris, who was known for drinking, was off to the side, and he wasn't even a guest on the show. And he comes and sits down at Johnny's desk, and it's pure anarchy. And stuff like that sometimes would happen on the show with Burt Reynolds, with shaving cream, with egg fights. And there were definitely spontaneous things that happened on the show that you would not see today.
But that maybe that is edgy. That was that sense of danger of you're watching, even though it wasn't live, something that felt very live,
yes,
very unpredictable.
Yeah, there were certain things, like they had Robert Goulet and John Davidson forgot the words to their song. Any other host now, they'd say, stop the tape, we're going to edit. And Johnny said, no, you're going to keep going until you get the words.
It's live to tape. Yeah.
And it was so funny because not only did the audience love this, but it made the stars look human, these big famous people. And it made them look so good. They got more time on the show. And that was uniquely Johnny.
There was something intimate about it. You'd have in prime time these variety shows that were produced and very.
That's right.
And then, after 11, there's something more intimate about it, and people let down their guard, and you really do get a sense of who these people are. I think that's part of the charm of it, and it was certainly the charm of Johnny. It was his real ability to make people feel comfortable enough to kind of be themselves. A lot of prep, though, goes into this show. This show is not off the cuff. In fact, I was surprised to read in your book that even some of the famous ad-libs were written ahead of time.
They would give it to him. Sometimes he'd use them. Sometimes he wouldn't. But in New York, they gave him ad-libs. In Burbank, only when they had what were called civilians, people that weren't famous, like the potato chip lady, this woman in Indiana who noticed the potato chips were in the shape of objects and went on Carson's show. So yeah, he was the most competitive late night host. You're not going to last 30 years and not be competitive. So he would watch the show every night. He would study the show. But yeah, he from the moment he woke up, he was working on that show.
He wasn't as neurotic as Letterman was. Apparently Letterman used to watch his shows and hate it. I mean, just hate it.
It was really hard. Yeah, because Dave he aspired to be Carson, as good as Carson. He never thought he was good, so it was very tortured. But it was very hard for Dave when the audience was not at a level of laughter where he thought he wanted them, and it was very difficult.
Yeah.
Much more than Carson could just shake off a show where Dave would just linger with him for days, if not weeks. What
was Johnny like off stage? Was he the same as he was on stage?
So the media would always say Johnny's cold and aloof, and Johnny would make fun of the moniker. The people I talked to that spent the most time consistently told me that there was very little change between Johnny on air and off air. It was a small group of people that knew him like that, but that was very consistent. If he didn't know the people, very shy, and also for self-preservation purposes, he would shut down because he couldn't walk 5 feet down the street without somebody grabbing his arm, or their threats to his life, climbing over his the fence where he lived in Bel Air. So he definitely had to protect his energy and his self-preservation. I mean, John Lennon, Mark David Chapman, who killed John Lennon, had a short list of people to kill if it wasn't John Lennon. Johnny was on that list.
Oh.
The FBI had to step in many times. So for self-preservation purposes, he definitely, people would think that it was this cold and aloof guy, but it was just Johnny trying to get through life. But if you knew him and he was your friend, they all said no one more loyal, and they said that he'd be almost the same Johnny.
Yeah. What did he have any recreation? I know when he retired and kind of lived on his boat.
He loved his boat. Yeah, he retired in May of 92, and then for 2 years made some appearances. Bob Hope's 90th birthday, American Teacher Awards, The Simpsons, made a cameo on Letterman, and then he said goodbye. He loved tennis. He loved Africa. He went on safari with Jim Fowler, who went on the show like 40 or 50 times. So he loved traveling to places.
He used to say that he liked going to France because nobody knew who he was.
He liked it for a couple of weeks. He liked the being private, but then after a while, it's like, oh man, come on, I need this. And yeah, he would go to England because they didn't get the show over there. They didn't really, wasn't broadcast. So yeah, that was the only place he could really go to get some,
nowadays, everything's international and there's no respite. And I don't know if people realize how horrific that kind of fame is. It is not a natural thing. And it's why so many big celebrities seem a little nutty, is because it makes you nutty. I remember Steve Martin telling me he was riding the subway to Brooklyn to see an art show, and he had this realization: I can never ride this subway again. He was mobbed, and he said, "I guess the subway is over for me." And
Carson. Yeah, it's hard.
It has to be a loss.
Carson tried to live the most normal life. He would drive himself. Ed McMahon had a limousine with the license plate, "Here's Ed." Johnny thought that was ridiculous. He'd drive himself. Ed McMahon, Johnny did not have a bodyguard. He did carry a gun, a licensed gun,
really,
for protection. He never had to use it, thank goodness. But he tried to live the most normal life. He was in a poker game, which would have been amazing to see, with Steve Martin, Neil Simon, Chevy Chase, Barry Diller. Martin Short played a few times. So he was out and about, but he was very, very careful with who he spent company with.
I think that's what happens is you create a bubble around yourself, and you let some people in. And once you trust somebody, you let those people in. But it is not a normal lifestyle. You are in a bubble. You're hermetically.
Especially when they're watching you when they're going to sleep. They feel like they know you. So people would literally go up to Johnny at restaurants and sit down at his table. They take him by his arm. "You have to meet my wife." And it just got to be really uncomfortable sometimes. So
was he a stand-up first? The story is that he was like Steve Martin did magic as a kid. Yeah.
Starting when he was 14, he did magic. Dick Cavett actually told me a story that when he was 12, he met Johnny Carson in a church basement where Carson was doing magic. In his early 20s, Carson.
They were both from Nebraska.
Yeah. So was Marlon Brando, and Carson and Brando were friends for decades, and they loved each other's company. There was a Nebraska bond there. Johnny then started doing ventriloquism, and then he moved out to Los Angeles. He was doing radio and a local TV. And he had his own national show that got canceled. And then he was able to get a host of a game show. And that was Who Do You Trust on ABC. And that led to The Tonight Show. Johnny did try a stand-up act once in Bakersfield, California. And I think 12 people showed up, and his agents didn't show up, and it was a disaster. Hence Bakersfield jokes for the rest of his run for decades.
That's why he always was knocking Bakersfield.
That's right. And now Carson in 1964 was offered millions of dollars to play Vegas, and he didn't think he could do it. And his wife, number 2, was the one that said, "You were going to do this. We can do this as a team." And then he broke Judy Garland's attendance record. I mean, he was...
Was that stand-up at that point? I know he studied singing. He learned how to sing.
It was stand-up. It was stand-up. I mean, it was more or less stand-up. He would tell stories. It was very different than The Tonight Show. He'd pace around and talk about himself and do stories. And it was, the Sahara Hotel was the hottest ticket in town.
Wow. I can understand that. I mean, I remember what a exciting moment it was for me. We were down in Burbank. I said, "Let's get tickets. We'll go see The Tonight Show." You wait in line, you go in, you see that theater, which is surprisingly small, but it sure feels like something familiar. And then Doc Severinsen and the band, they're so good. They're so tight. They sound so great. They play. And you really get that sense. Ed comes out, does the warm up. It's chills. Even now thinking about it, it's chills.
Someone like Letterman, when he would do the show, would need complete silence backstage, where Johnny would be. I interviewed the guy who held the curtain open for Johnny.
Yeah, always somebody pulling the curtain open. Yeah.
Johnny would just be joking around back there, smoking a cigarette, and just up until "Here's Johnny," he'd be joking around. Everyone has their own process, but Johnny just could not wait to get out there. The amount of energy. People told me they could tell when he was walking down the hall, to the energy, sparks flying off of him. Letterman, very much the same way, they told me. And they said shaking hands with Johnny during the show was like shaking hands with a nuclear reactor.
Wow.
There was just an energy, and he was able to take people that were scared out of their minds. They'd sit down with him, and the nerves would just go away. Someone like Elizabeth Taylor, who took 29 years to agree to do Johnny's show, went out there, and instantly Carson had this magic about him that he was able to make people feel comfortable. I mean, that's a skill set not everyone has.
We're talking to Mark Malkoff, the author of a new book, Love Johnny Carson. He also does the Carson podcast at carsonpodcast.com. And I'm looking at the list of people you have interviewed. It's mind-boggling.
Really nice.
Dana Carvey, Gabe Kaplan, Barry Gibb, Tina Sinatra, Cara Burnett, Richard Lewis, almost right before he passed away. On and on. Who is your favorite?
Yeah. I really, let's see. I liked Stephen Wright. I liked Carol Burnett. Mel Brooks. Mel is
man.
notoriously difficult for him to say yes. And Carl Reiner was in his home in Beverly Hills, and he told Mel, "You got to talk to this kid." And the next day, I went to Mel's office in Culver City, and hanging out with Mel Brooks was special. I really, really liked here in New York going to Michael J. Fox's office because I worked for him. I was an intern on Spin City. It was a sitcom. And I really wanted Michael to tell the story about before he got famous. He had an audition at NBC Burbank and went through the dumpster and got a Johnny Carson cue card and has it framed in his home. So a lot of these people just were so excited and happy to talk about Johnny. I mean, people kept asking me, Mark, how are you getting all these icons? And I said, it was a very happy accident. I did not know that I picked the subject matter that everybody would want to talk about. So that's how it
There's so
happened.
much love for Carson. And I think people are a little afraid that he will be forgotten because this is what happens,
It really does. I mean, you could be the hottest thing in TV. Rosie O'Donnell was hot. The hottest thing in daytime. Nobody, she says that younger people have no idea. Unless you're in constant rotation like Seinfeld on TV or Lucille Ball to some extent, the public does start to forget. But thankfully on YouTube, I mean, I get emails sometimes from younger people. I'm shocked that are watching on Carson clips and they love it. So, I mean, it is a lot of those stuff it's as funny as it was 30 years ago. And I'm glad people are discovering him.
That's actually interesting because a lot of times comedy doesn't age well.
That's right. Yeah.
You watch Lenny Bruce and you go, what was the big deal?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but why do you think Carson does it? Why is he so eternal?
I think there was a likability about this guy. It was just your friend Johnny, and he just was just such an entertaining guy. I can't think of anybody else that did this show better, and had such a rapport with his guests. He just made his guests shine. He shined. And some of those clips, I mean, millions of views if you look at them. There's just people miss him to this day.
And maybe that's the key because it wasn't about his jokes, which are going to be topical and perhaps less funny nowadays. It was really about the people that he brought on, and even if these people were no longer, Jackie Gleason, no longer really well known, they're fascinating, and he brings out. Of course, there's a lot of prep that goes in that. These people would come on and tell stories. There's a whole prep ahead of time, right?
There is, but Johnny was such a curious person that he would sometimes throw out the pre-interview. They'd have it, but a lot of times if something was going, and the funniest thing is that they would sometimes, famous actors would get bumped for the potato chip lady when she went on the show. Actress Jennifer Tilly was bumped. Jennifer told me the story, and they did an extra segment with the potato chip lady. They put on the potato chip lady before the big stars. And Johnny would a lot of times just throw out the pre-interview. Like Jay Leno was very much about trying to be as funny as his guest, and he was not a curious person. Maybe if it came to cars or comedy, where Johnny would read the books and he was just endlessly curious. I mean, after the show, he would not have dinner with the big stars. It was always he'd have dinner with Carl Sagan, Jim Fowler, people that he was just curious about.
He was fascinated by astronomy, right? He
That's right.
Yeah. Might have been an astronomer had he not been an entertainer. He was very interested in science.
That's right. He would just pick Carl Sagan's brain and they would go out and Johnny would visit him. I mean, Johnny, there was a treasure hunter. I think Mel Fisher was his name in Key West, and he went on Johnny's show. And Johnny said, "Can I come to Key West and go diving with you?" And Johnny did. I mean, that was his curiosity. I mean, this was in the mid 80s. It wasn't televised. Johnny was just a very curious person.
In the early days, he did a lot of risky stuff, like jumping out of airplanes that I think later on, once he became really valuable to NBC, they wouldn't let him do. I was stunned reading your book about how many wild things that he did.
He was pitching to Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris in Yankee Stadium. He was going to the Polo Grounds and playing with the New York Jets, jumping out of airplanes. Race car at Indianapolis Motor Speed Highway with Parnelli Jones and Mario Andretti going hundreds of miles an hour.
But they would pre-record these for the show and then drop them in. Is that how it worked?
So most of them, were on most of those were on the show. I think all of those. And then he would do these things where they would sometimes have stunt performers on, and Johnny would do these things where he would fall like 20 or 30 feet, and he was a daredevil. I say the first maybe 15, 20 years in New York, I would say he was a daredevil.
It's really fun to watch the old shows because the aesthetics of television in those days were pretty painfully bad. Fake trees.
That was some of the charm. That's right.
Yeah, it really didn't look good. But over time, as it became a more successful show and NBC was making millions and millions a year, as was Johnny, the set got much nicer. I was watching Jonathan Winters, by the way. Winters was always great on Johnny. It was Christmas time, and he had the most beautiful Christmas set behind him. It was just really gorgeous.
When you were making 25% of all of NBC's profits, they better be giving you a good set.
Wow.
I think it was Steve Martin that said Johnny was the most recognizable person in America, maybe as the president, as recognizable.
Oh, yeah.
When he was making that much money for NBC, I mean, in 1980, it was unheard of for somebody to get ownership of the show, and he did that. So Carson Productions. So to this day, I mean, his estate, his nephew Jeff Sotzig is the one that runs the YouTube channel, and Johnny owned it all.
Oh, that's nice. So he married. He had how many times? 3, 4, 5.
4. Ed McMahon 3. Doc Severinsen, I think 3 or 4. Yes, they definitely were. They liked their wives.
All of Johnny's wives were named Joanna, though. That was a little strange. Or 3 of them were.
Jody, Joanne, Joanna, and then Alex. Wife number Alex 2 was the one that was the Tonight Show never would have happened without her. She's the one that got NBC without Johnny's knowledge to come to a Friars Club roast to see Johnny perform and orchestrated everything behind the scenes. She was hiring and firing producers. Johnny had no idea how powerful she was.
That's the story. One of the stories in the book that I found most fascinating. She really was the ambitious one of the pair.
That's right.
Got
Vegas.
him the job.
Everything was her. I mean, everybody told Johnny to turn it down. Jack Parr was the biggest thing in TV, and Carson turned it down. And she said, "No, we're going to do this as a team." And that was the confidence that Carson said yes. And she was in the front row for months, rooting Johnny on and working with him. And she was the architect of the Tonight Show for sure.
You interviewed a guy who I worked with on the Screensavers, Paul Block, who was a talent coordinator for Carson. And much later, he produced Alan Thicke's In the Thick of the Night up in Canada. And much later in the year 2000, we hired him to produce the TV show I was doing.
Oh, wow.
I wish I'd gotten more out of Paul about working for Johnny.
We had Paul on a few times, like 3 or 4 times, I think, on the podcast. Yeah, there's great stories.
Yeah, he's a great guy. So it was kind of a nice kismet. Tell us the story of William Shatner. One of our club members is quoting from your book about Shatner.
I appreciate that. So William Shatner was his 3rd time on with Johnny Carson, and Carson expected if somebody came into his home, they were going to act a certain way and abide by manners. One was that it was a back and forth conversation. William Shatner comes out and for like 3 minutes will not let Johnny get a word in. And he deviates from what they agreed they were going to talk about and is just boring. He's boring everybody. So that was the first thing, that he wouldn't let Johnny get a word in. And then he turns his back to Johnny to talk to the previous guest, Buddy Hackett. And Johnny hated when a guest would turn his back to Johnny, thought it was bad manners. And then back then, you weren't allowed to say the other network of shows. If you were on NBC, you could say the show was on NBC. But back then they would say, TJ Hooker on Saturday nights on another network. And of course, Shatner said, watch me on ABC. So 3 strikes and you're out. Shatner was allowed to go on with guest hosts, but not with Carson. Carson said he's done.
Wow.
So
wow.
Yeah.
So he really did hold grudges a little bit for somewhat petty reasons.
I mean, Carl Sagan was one of his good friends and interrupted him twice on air and corrected him in an appearance. And he said he's never coming back. Very, very thin skin. Johnny would talk about his struggles on air. He said, I'm very sensitive. People, the famous actors that said the critics don't hurt me. He's like, I don't believe it. He would get very hurt. He would talk about that he struggled with competition, very competitive. And he would talk about that he struggled with drinking. He was very transparent about his struggles on air. And he would joke about how bad he was as being married and how many wives he went through with those jokes.
Right.
I mean, I
always assumed the mug in front of him had water, but you say it was vodka tonic.
In New York, it was he would do an hour and 45 minutes that went down to 90 minutes. And he would not be drunk on the show, but he would drink vodka in New York. And he would drink apple juice or water in New York, but in Los Angeles, rather, in Burbank.
So he stopped drinking at some point, or Just cut
he
back.
got arrested for drinking in 1982. He got stopped because he had expired tags. It was not because of drinking and driving. He agreed to a breathalyzer test. And basically, he went on the show and he comes out of the curtains with an actor who's playing a police officer. And Johnny basically said, "You're never going to see me this happen again." And it never did. And he kind of got it a little bit more out of control. But I think he was driving his DeLorean. He was an investor with John DeLorean. And Johnny just, oh my goodness, talk about your money going bye-bye. But yeah, we actually have, I have this really wonderful photo in my book of Johnny holding Kat DeLorean, John's daughter, and Kat gave me permission to include that book, and it's the photo, and it's a wonderful photo. But yeah, Johnny was a very early investor and was friends with John DeLorean.
The book is Love Johnny Carson. I'm listening to it from Audible, but you can also buy it at your favorite books. Actually, not Audible. I got it on Libro.fm because I wanted to.
Oh, that's fantastic. I did my best. Like, I did it over 5 days, the audiobook. There are some things I might have mispronounced here and there, but I don't
hear any, and I hear that in a lot of books. So I think you did very well. You did.
I was very nervous.
The Carson podcast is great. Everybody should listen to it. CarsonPodcast.com. Before we wrap up, because we're out of time, I wish we weren't. Yeah. After Johnny retired, he did a few shows. I remember when I was on Regis Philbin with Live with Kelly and Regis when he announced his retirement. And he said, like Johnny did when he announced his retirement, "I'm not leaving showbiz. You're going to see me. I'm just doing some different stuff."
That's right.
But for both of them, it wasn't really true. It was kind of the end. Was he happy in the final years?
Johnny was okay with it. Regis, who I worked with, who I talked to, was not. He had a really tough time not being on TV every day. And it was really, really hard. He's one of those people that when he went to a restaurant would love when people would come up to him for autographs and photos. Don Rickles was the same. He needed that from the public. I know somebody in the chat was saying, maybe don't go up to famous people. There are, trust me, some people that live and breathe getting recognition from people.
And then there are
but
some
Johnny
people who
didn't
don't
need that. Johnny was... I did it. He didn't want to become Bob Hope. He said, he left in 1992. He said, "I did for 30 years. I dominated, let the work speak for itself." And he didn't want the work to go down. Like, he thought Bob Hope just stuck around too long. He thought Lucille Ball, it was a mistake doing a comeback in the 80s. And he said, "I want to be remembered for the best work that I did. And I did it. And I don't need to go in front of the public anymore."
He still was pretty young when he passed, wasn't he?
He was 79. Now, Leo, he was chain smoking, but he had emphysema. I mean, he was chain smoking 2 packs of Pall Malls unfiltered since he was 14. His dad was a chain smoker in Nebraska. Johnny didn't quit until 1992, until he left, and it was just too late. I mean, he had a quadruple bypass surgery. It was just really, when he was, a week or two before he died, he told his brother it's the damn cigarettes, and it was just really, really sad.
Lisa and I were watching a clip, and she said, "Did he smoke on the show?" I said, "You see that box in front of him? That's a box of cigarettes. See that lighter next to it?" He would frequently light up during the show, as would his guests.
Yes, and then when it became unfashionable for that, Carson would do it during the breaks.
You'd see him bending over and putting his cigarette down. The band's playing. He's going like that. Yeah.
And if somebody was telling a story and it was a tight shot, Carson would sneak a puff here and there, and the audience at home wouldn't get to see it. But he had tried to quit, and he did a good job. And then his son in 1991 had this tragic accident. I think he was 39 years old. He was a photographer, fell off the road into a cliff with the car, and Johnny was devastated. Took a month off, and then he started smoking again, and it was really sad. That was the hardest show Johnny said he ever did. At the end, he eulogized his son, and they showed photographs that his son had taken, and it was really, really. Johnny was never the same.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised. That's a horrible.
Yeah, he did play tennis. Somebody's asking, Chris. Oh, hey, Chris. He did play tennis in the retirement. It was going to Wimbledon.
Yeah.
He loved his tennis.
Loved his tennis. Yeah. I'll never forget the final show. It was, and Bette Midler singing. Oh my God. I mean, it was a teary moment. And I don't think, I didn't believe that he was going to retire. I just couldn't believe that there would be no more Johnny Carson.
I think a lot of people, he was pitched. He had an office in Santa Monica, and people were pitching him ideas all the time. And he would consider them, and he thought he might come back. And he just said, "You know what? I did it." But that Bette Midler to this day has never watched the performance because it was so magical. Johnny said in all his 30 years, nothing has ever come close to what happened with Bette Midler. You know, Bette Midler, after that song, which won her an Emmy, singing to Johnny, she was supposed to sit down with Johnny and talk to her, but she was just sobbing uncontrollably, and Johnny was crying, so she just ran off the stage. And Robin Williams, the next day, he was also on that show called Johnny in Tears, just how much that being on that show meant to him going on with Johnny.
She is one of the many performers who credit Johnny Carson with her career. She was just singing in the baths.
Leo, so Johnny discovers her, puts her on the Tonight Show, and then has her open up for him in Vegas. And the audience is like, they do not get her.
Who is this?
Dying they don't understand. She was considered outrageous at the time. Right. And people they did not accept her at first. And Johnny really put her into that spotlight. And of course, she became Bette Midler, but it took a little time. But Johnny was definitely an early champion of hers. We've
really lost something with the Tonight Show, but I'm so glad that you've preserved so much of it on your podcast, the Carson podcast, and
really appreciate
with the book Love Johnny Carson. Mark, it was a real pleasure talking to you and bringing back these memories. I'd encourage people to read the book, listen to the podcast, and then do what I did, which is go to YouTube and start watching the clips, and you'll understand why people of my generation revere Johnny Carson. He really changed the world of entertainment. And
there was nobody better. Every time they do one of those polls, who's the greatest of all time late night host, it's still Carson to this day. And the guy's been off the air for 30 years. So Leo, thank you so much for being a pal. I really, really love doing this with you.
Well, it sounds like we've crossed paths many times and never met. So I'm glad to meet you finally.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
I will keep listening to the podcast, keep making episodes. What else are you working on?
I'm just doing a podcast called Inside Late Night for LateNighter.com. I'm considering maybe doing a book about Saturday Night Live at some point, just because I know a lot about SNL, a lot of stories that haven't been told. So yeah,
gosh, I thought everything all the stories have been told. There's plenty of stuff still out there.
There is a lot out there.
There's a wild show, boy.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it is one of those shows. I mean, in terms of longevity, 50 years without any serious competition.
Isn't that amazing?
Carson and Lorne Michaels with Saturday Night Live and Johnny Carson, I think, are the only two things I can really think that didn't have. I mean, people tried to take on Carson, but no one made a dent with his ratings. I mean, Arsenio came close, different audiences, but Johnny's ratings were still higher than Arsenio's.
Arsenio was the closest?
I think so.
Really?
I think Joan Rivers, the very first night on Fox, had a really high number, but it just went down. And after 10 months, she was not the host anymore.
Right.
But yeah, I think Arsenio was probably the closest. To Johnny.
Nobody had whatever that magic was that Johnny had of being every man. There was something about it that has just never been replicated. And
people have tried for whatever reason. He was born to do this, and he was himself when he was out there. He was Nebraska. And people, we just miss him. I mean, he broke America's heart when he said goodbye, and he thought about coming back, and then we never saw him again.
Mark Malkoff, thank you so much.
Thank you, Leo. This was so much fun.
Great to meet you. Great to talk to you. Love Johnny Carson. We do.
Yes.
Wow, that was fun. I could do another 3 hours,
thank you so much. I know you're super busy. I'm great. I'm so honored. When I told my wife that you emailed me back and I was going on, she couldn't believe it. I was like, I believe in the power of asking. I'm just going to ask.
I'm so glad you asked. And it was real kismet because I literally had just bought the book. I was very excited about listening to it. I didn't know about the podcast. I now have a lot of stuff to listen to. I've got to listen to this Paul
flattered. I mean, no, everything you've accomplished. I mean, you're a legend. I'm not surprised that they knew who you were at Letterman and made you sit up there. I mean,
I was shocked. I thought, what? You know me? You know who I am?
Yeah.
I guess though, I repeat the story, so it must have been an honor. I think it was an honor, but I'll never forget watching Dave work.
Oh gosh, he was a really master. Him and Carson, I think, probably were the best that did it. And, I'm glad Dave still sticks around. I mean, it's been 10 years and he still is doing things and is as funny as he was.
So. It hurts me that he doesn't know how great he is. Kind of hurts me.
I know, he just can't take a compliment, and it's just so many people look at him as kind of like their Johnny Carson, and he for whatever
he is
reason,
in a way for me. Even I mean, I'm a little. I mean, look, I'm 70, so I'm old enough to have grown up with Johnny. But Letterman was to me, more my generation, more like Saturday Night Live. And I remember watching Saturday Night Live when it started.
The humor was so innovative, and Dave was the coolest.
It was fresher.
He was the coolest guy. People that worked on that show for years worship Dave. And it was just one of those things where, for whatever reason, Dave just did not really, he basically only talked to like 5 or 6 people, but people were there because they loved that man. And there wasn't much interaction there, unfortunately, but people just, they gave their careers to him.
You worked there a year.
Him. I did. I was there for a year. That I was just like, the environment wasn't my favorite, and it was just probably not the best time to be there, so I got out. But yeah, it was my pleasure to be there, and I think it was the last time Dave did an anniversary show. I was there the 5th year anniversary. The last time he went to the holiday party we had it on stage. He was there for that, and then I saw him when we did a staff photo, and I think that was the extent that I saw him. He was very closed off. It's just he's really, really shy. I couldn't get him to talk to me for my book, but I tried. But it's all good.
You'd think people in the interviewing business would be a little bit more accommodating to people who do interviews.
Dave is really shy, and I think it's hard because Johnny was his hero,
right?
And I think he would get very emotional, maybe talking about him. That's all.
That might be
his inner circle. I'm friendly with them, and Dave knows about the book. And
come on, Dave.
But
come on, Dave. Do the podcast, and Steve, do the podcast. Come on, guys.
We shall see. Power of asking. I worked with you. I'm grateful. Not always, but
I got Steve to be on our show once. That was fun. And he called when I was ending the radio show. This was the greatest honor of all. I said, Steve, I'm going to stop. I'm going to retire. Would you come on and announce it? Because I don't want to tell anybody. And he came on and he announced it for me, which is like, wow.
He's the holy grail of comedians. I mean, in terms of changing stand-up and his longevity and just how smart that guy is.
He's super smart. That's what's really interesting. He's multi-talented, very smart, but also hard working.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And just his writing in the New Yorker. I mean,
I know. I love it. I know. I love it. He's wonderful.
Yeah, he's definitely one of my heroes. Nice man when I met him the one time or two times.
And you worked with Regis. When did you work with Live or where?
I worked on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire when it was the #1 show. I was there when John Carpenter won the $1 million. It was TV. And Regis would get so impatient because he's used to live TV, and the tapings would take 2.5 hours, a lot of start and stop. But I have to say, Regis
Live
was
is fast.
So good.
And Gelman keeps that moving. My son just did Live, and he said, "What's with that guy, Gelman?"
Oh yes, he keeps it moving. And Regis lived right across the street from there.
I know.
So he would just show up like 10 minutes before, do Live, in and out. And Millionaire,
he had a great life.
He really did. He was a very nice man. It was really hard. It kind of broke my heart a little bit, just that how hard it was, but he just needed the people. He would go to a restaurant and just say, Regis is coming, and now it's he. And then Regis is leaving, and just needed people to be coming up to him.
He was of course, the sidekick. He was the Ed McMahon to Joey Bishop on the Joey Bishop show.
Right.
So he was he was probably a second banana for a long time. And so once he kind of got to be a star, he probably thought, God, Gelman would always make me, whenever I showed an MP3 player, put Regis's album on it. Oh my God. But there is a video on YouTube of me teaching Regis to use Twitter. And it was very much that. Is like he was so excited because he tweeted, "I'm retiring." And then I said, "Now see, they're responding to you." And just as you say, he was so thrilled. He said, "They're talking to me." And he called his wife. He said, Joy, they're talking to me on Twitter. He was like, just as you say, he was so driven by that kind of audience approval, by that love. He quit Twitter 2 weeks later because he realized it wasn't always love.
No, not always. But
it's a fun moment. They made a pretty good little segment out of it.
I'm really glad that you made him happy, and he was just.
I really liked Reg.
He was one. Dave Letterman would say Regis was the best broadcaster that was alive at that point. And Dave said, "I know people might think I'm making a joke, but I'm not." But Regis was an incredible broadcaster, and it was a privilege to work with him. And I'm glad I got to work with him. A really, really nice man, you know. So he was the same off and off. He was another example of somebody that was himself. 100%
He always
when he was
just a
out
joke
there.
because I would come on and do tech segments. And he'd go, "What's a gigabyte, Leo? What's a gigabyte?" So, he used to
That's
make fun of
fantastic.
him. He was just great. He was great.
I love hearing your stories, and I love that you knew these people and that you got to.
I've been very fortunate at being on the periphery. It's nice to be not famous and be on the periphery of this because it is nice to meet your heroes. As you know, it's really interesting to watch this from afar. And so, I've been very fortunate. Mark, thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Part of my good fortune.
So much. Yeah,
nice to meet you.
All
right.
Yeah. Happy New Year, my friend.
Happy New Year.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Mark Malkoff, the book Love, Johnny Carson. Thank you, Mark. Thanks to all of you who watch, and thanks especially to our Club TWiT members. We do these shows without advertising, sponsored basically by the club. We do stream them live to the public on YouTube and Twitch and X and Facebook, LinkedIn, and Kick. And I see a lot of you in there, including some fans of Mark. So it's great to have you watching live. After the fact, the shows go into the Club TWiT Plus feed, so the club members can continue to listen. I think, tell me, Anthony, do we make them public right away now, or do we still wait 30 days?
30 days.
So 30 days after we make the shows that we do for the club public. We want to give the club first access because they're the ones who pay the production costs of this. So thank you, Club TWiT members. And if you're watching live or watching after 30 days, if you want to join the club, we'd love to have you. twit.tv/Club TWiT. You get ad-free versions of all the shows, and you support additional programming like this that we do from time to time. And really, your support is what makes it happen. So thank you so much. All right. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.